So I thought that this painting was done, but something about it kept bothering me. I didn't hate it, but I felt like it could go from pretty good to actually a bit more finished if I just gave it one more layer. I've been trying to break out of this habit of stopping a piece when the painting just looks good enough. Okay, I think it's been a week since I worked on the betta fish study. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do another pass on it and maybe just try to push some of the details a bit more and maybe up the contrast on the fish. And then I think I want to push the shadows pretty much everywhere on the fish and maybe add some nice highlights and stuff. I feel pretty poopy today. I don't know if it's just allergies or what. So it'll kind of be nice just to do some small little changes on this fish, and then we'll see how long this takes me. So here are my goals for this pass. I wanted to first bump up the saturation in the fins and make those red areas more red. I wanted to push the darks and the lights a bit further, and then I wanted to just add some small details like make the fish scales a bit more defined and also add a bit more to the fin texture to kind of make them look a bit more like fins. I started with a transparent glaze over the parts of the fish body that I wanted to darken up a bit. I used a mix of raw umber paint with sepia, and then I added a bit of medium to thin it out a bit. In this case, I was using a mix of linseed oil and galkid light and Gamsol, I believe. Glazing is just so satisfying. You can quickly just darken things up or slightly tint things to a different color. It's one of my favorite steps, and I tend to do it at the beginning of a pass, and then I'll paint back into it with more opaque layers, and then it kind of makes the colors blend a bit better and be a bit more cohesive, and it really kind of brings everything together. Now that I have that base glaze down, I'm just going in and adding details where I see them in my reference photo and just trying to, again, define any details that I can see that would really make this fish look a bit more realistic. I don't care about it looking hyper realistic, but anything to just make it look more like a detailed fish. And so I decided I would start with outlining a lot more of the scales on the fish's body, and those would be the shadows surrounding the scales because the scales have a bit of a topography. I honestly was worried I was making a mistake at this point. It was looking a little cartoony, but I just told myself looking at the reference photo, I do see shadows around each of the scales, so it looks like they sort of have this outline. So I just kind of told myself trust the process. I'm gonna keep painting the scales and add highlights where I see them, and then hopefully it'll look more realistic at the end. And worst case, I can take a brush and smear all these shadows out. So I was just telling myself to trust the process, and I think that's important. If you're painting what you see, you should just trust that if you keep on with it, it'll probably turn out okay. But yeah, it definitely gets a little stressful when it looks a little silly and is kind of in more of that ugly stage. So now I am bumping up the highlights I see on the fish, focusing on those scales that really bounce a lot of light off of them and look really light in the reference photo. And I think that helps some of the outlines that I was kind of concerned about earlier look a bit more normal. It's so satisfying being in this state and having a nice underpainting to work with and just going through and pushing details where you can and bumping up highlights. I find that it's a really meditative process. I really enjoy this part of the painting at the end where I'm just kind of pushing everything as much as I can. And I'm trying a little bit too to give some color variation to the scales as well. So I might mix a little bit of green into paint and make the scales have a slightly more green tint compared to blue. Now I'm repeating this detailing process, but for the fins of the fish. So I'm looking at my reference photo and seeing what shadows can I emphasize on the fins, what highlights can I emphasize on the fins. And I'm really trying to show that wrinkly texture that the fins have. You can see with the highlights specifically. Once I got to these fins, I wanted to bump up the shadows a bit more than I already had during my previous glazing layer. So I just went ahead and glazed over all of it again, which was fine because I hadn't painted any opaque paint over this area. If I would have done that earlier, I would have kind of smeared all that paint around and destroyed everything when I would have tried to glaze. But because I hadn't done that yet, it was fine for me to do another quick little glazing layer to darken it up a bit before I went in with my more opaque paint. And then I'm just continuing along, bumping up the saturation for a lot of the areas of the fin, like adding really dark purple paint to parts of the fin, really bumping up those highlights where I can see them, and just, putting all those final details on the fins, and just doing as much as I can with this final layer before I call it a day. This part's really satisfying because I knew I wanted those more frontal fins to be super bright pink because that's how they are on the reference photo. So I did another bright pink glaze over those fins before going in with the more opaque paint, which again was fine because I hadn't really touched those fins yet except for glazes. So it was fine for me to really bump up the saturation before going in with thicker paint to do all the detailing. think I'm gonna be done for now and maybe for always. I might be done with this study, but we'll see. I feel like I did learn a bit. I have a better understanding of how like fins look and how scales are really reflecty. I guess I knew that already. Let me know what you think, my little fish. Okay, I'm calling this one done. It's still a study and I could totally keep messing with it, but I feel like I got what I wanted out of it. Next up, I'm working on a mermaid piece and a tribute painting that I'm really excited about. They're both going to be a little different from this one, but I'm excited to share the process. Thanks for hanging out and painting with me, and I'll talk to you soon.